Latinas are among the most underrepresented populations in sports, really at all levels: youth, high school, college, Olympic, and the professional level. You broke through. How do we get and keep more of them in the game?
I'm a big believer in representation and what that can do for others. And I think when you don't see yourself on screen, whether that's in movies and film, because that matters very much so, or especially in sports, I think it causes a lot of us to doubt ourselves and wonder if we can do it because there's nobody who looks like us. And so thankfully, my parents were just super supportive in making sure that I didn't see that as a barrier. And I think I caught on. I didn't notice anybody who looked like me, but I didn't see it as like, no, so that means it's never going to happen. I was like, okay, we're just going to have to do something different. That's how it is. And I was okay with that. And because of my parents, because of the way I was raised, and being determined to get there, I think that played a really big role into me kind of heading to the Olympics and being able to be that representation for those kids that are watching. And I'm hoping that with that kind of representation and representation in other sports and across other platforms, we get other kids who are like, okay, they did it, that means I can too. Because I think it really, at the end of the day, it starts with you, but environment also matters. Gymnastics is a very expensive sport, so especially if you're living in an environment where financially it's not something you can handle, then you can't even start it in the first place. So being able to make it easily or more readily acceptable for more families, I think is really important.
Yep. How did you get into sports and why?
So my whole family is a sports family. My mom did, I think it was volleyball and aerobics and just a bunch of other stuff. My dad did baseball. My brother did baseball and track. My sister's a black belt in karate, and then me, a professional gymnast. So being active really runs in the family. I think my parents really wanted all of us to be active and to be moving in sports. And I had originally started out in ballet when I was 3. They told me that if I paid attention well, that they would give me a sugar cookie at the end of the workout. So I stayed for 2 more years. And then I saw 2 athletes that I just thought they looked incredible, 2 gymnasts on the balance beam. And I remember pointing to the screen and telling my mom, like, I want to be just like those girls. And she said, okay. That's how I got started.
Wow. So sugar cookies, that's the key.
That's the key. Cookies are the key to my heart. I mean, you need anything, just give me a cookie and it's all yours.
Right. So what did you enjoy about sports and gymnastics initially?
There are a lot of things that I really enjoyed, especially growing up. I think making new friends was super huge, especially because I started homeschooling in 3rd grade. And so having teammates who were in that same situation that I was, where we're all in the same environment for a really long time together, and getting to just connect with them and have people who are in the same, good situation, but situation that I was in was very helpful. Another one was just in sport. Of course, when you're a kid, learning how to be disciplined and how to pay attention and be respectful, all those things can be really tough because that's how we learn. But gymnastics has taught me a lot of those things. And I think the biggest part, especially just for me, is feeling so empowered and doing things that a lot of people maybe just don't want to touch or get near. I think the challenge is just so much fun. I can't help but get my hands on it.
Yeah. Now you're from a family that's obviously very athletic and active. How common was it where you grew up for other Latinas to play sports and have ambitions in doing things in sport?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully I was in a neighborhood that was pretty diverse. I didn't notice representation, but I didn't see anyone shutting it down. So it didn't feel like a barrier, whereas I know that in many environments, a lot of diversity isn't common, whether that's in different states, but in the city that I was in Old Bridge, it was pretty diverse. And there are a lot of different things that me and my siblings had to kind of grow through together, I think, especially with all 3 of us looking just a little different. We could all pass as triplets, but if you really look, I'm full on just Boricua, I'm full on Puerto Rican, and so are my siblings, but my brother with his eyes are bright green, his hair is very curly, he has a lot of facial hair, he's tall, he looks Middle Eastern, so it's like he can get stopped at different places that maybe me and my sister wouldn't, and my sister has kind of the palest skin of all 3 of us, so with that being said, it's like all of our experiences inside of sport and outside have been pretty different.
Yeah. Why don't you think we see more young girls who are Hispanic playing sports? What are the barriers that come to mind for you?
I think a lot of it has to do with environment and just like I know, especially going through puberty in gymnastics and watching my body change, being able to have the proper sportswear and the proper attire and the proper things to make sure that I'm still safe while I'm doing everything that I'm doing. All of that can really add up and can get very expensive, and especially in a sport where change is very difficult to deal with, especially when you get used to doing something over and over again. If one little thing changes, then the whole thing changes. So gymnastics is a sport where when kids hit about 12, 13, or when they start going through puberty, that's a time where a lot of athletes will start dropping out, and not just for gymnastics, but for most sports. And making sure that you have the proper encouragement to stick with it and that you are financially, kind of capable to stick in there. I think a lot of those are factors that we need to really look into, and to make sure that we're keeping an eye out and making it all inclusive for everybody to have an incentive to stay.
Well, do you have any advice for schools, meaning administrators, PE teachers, coaches, on how to get more Latinas playing sports in school settings?
I think encouragement is really important, because just because maybe I didn't notice it as a barrier doesn't mean that other kids don't. I do consider my situation to be pretty lucky and kind of like a nature versus nurture type of thing. If you see kids that are maybe shy because they speak two languages and they're still kind of getting used to it, especially the young ones who are still adjusting to a new environment, encourage them and talk to them and try to get to know them, because especially Hispanic culture is just making sure that there's family and there's trust and there's love all around. And it's, when that's kind of ingrained in you, making friends can seem a little bit scary because you're looking for those things, but like at such a young age, so being able to connect with people, having encouragement, hey, you know what, I think this would be great, you should try it, and keeping that encouragement going. And not just for young Latino kids, but also young Black kids, making sure that they're not excluded, because that's a form of that's a subtle form of racism, of not making sure that all kids are included and that we're only reaching out to certain kids that we think can excel without giving everybody a shot.
Yeah. Now, you're obviously a very good dancer. You won Dancing with the Stars. Congratulations. What about dancing as a high school sport? Is that an opportunity to maybe engage more girls?
Absolutely. I think dance is I think it's a wonderful way to connect. It was always a way for me and my family to get together, but especially as a competitive sport. I have family friends who had done dance throughout high school, and just they loved it. I don't believe it was through a high school class, but they had taken it just on the outside and fell in love with movement. If it was a rough day, they were able to take it out on their own movements. And I think it's something that should definitely be implemented, and make sure that everybody at least gets a chance to try it, a chance at everything. They might as well dip your toe in the water. So dance is wonderful. I'm a big outspoken person on getting everybody to get moving, especially in a rhythmic way.
Right. I mean, and Dancing with the Stars is sort of can probably engage your competitive juices, right?
Maybe a little bit. Maybe. Week one, I was like, so we're winning, right?
You honestly nailed it. Yes.
Me? Competitive? No way. No. Never.
Were you competitive really since you were a little kid, or did that develop over time?
I'm going to go ahead and say it was since I was a little kid. I mean, I'm sure it had to do with being the youngest of three. Seeing my siblings do something, and there's kind of that whole joke of like, anything you can do I can do better. Like that was our little so I'd watch them do things and I was like, I can do that, and then like would kind of just go and do it. It was, I'd say I was very competitive since I was a kid. If we did board games, I had to be taught how to not be a sore loser, because I just wanted to sneak my way in there. But yeah, I mean, again, kind of goes in that pattern of representation. Even my older siblings were people that I looked up to and I watched do things, and I was like, oh, okay, they do it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it better, because competitive. But you know, to kids who are only kids, that representation may not exist for them. So.
Right. So maybe I'm asking this question to the wrong person, but how do you make room for girls who maybe aren't that competitive, or boys? I mean, some kids just aren't wired in the same way that you are. Any ideas?
Yeah, just make it a safe space for everybody. Because at the end of the day, also, everybody's different. I mean, and everybody is constantly changing. Some days I'm really competitive, and I'm usually very competitive with myself, especially being a little older now. I'm like, okay, everybody does everything. I'm just trying to beat out my last score. But um, making sure that it's a safe place for everyone to be themselves, and whether that's being really competitive or that's just wanting to be better at what you do, better at your sport. I think all of those things are very important to take into consideration, and that we're not putting them on the sidelines just because their intentions are different, and we're giving everybody a shot.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for your insights. They're terrific. And we'll talk to you more later about some of your other thoughts on topics at the Project Play Summit.